The order was absolute. Disarm her. 5 elite trainers encircled the woman they called a system error. The 83 seconds that followed would shatter careers, expose a buried truth, and redefine the meaning of elite. The transport shuddered to a halt at the gates of Fort Drakon, a high-altitude training facility carved into a desolate mountain range. The soldiers inside, 17 candidates for the military's most demanding special operations program, blinked against the thin, merciless sunlight. They called this place the Cauldron, a crucible where careers were forged or incinerated. Most wore the same mask of tense anticipation, jaws tight, eyes scanning the unforgiving landscape of rock and steel. Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Maddox watched them disembark from shaded observation deck, his expression a mixture of boredom and contempt. He was the gatekeeper of the Cauldron, a man whose authority was as sharp and jagged as the peaks surrounding them. His eyes swept over the new arrivals, dismissing them one by one, until they locked on an inconsistency. One of them didn't belong. She wore scuffed civilian hiking boots, a plain charcoal gray top, and no tactical gear. Her file identified her as Anya Petrova. While the others moved with the nervous energy of initiates, she moved with an unhurried, almost liquid economy of motion. It wasn't arrogance, nor was it fear. It was a profound certainty, as if she were walking through a place she had already committed to memory. Every firing angle, every blind spot, every exit. Who the hell walks into the Cauldron like they've already graduated? Maddox muttered to himself. Miles away, in a sterile command center, Commander Reed pulled up the same file on her terminal. It was clean, too clean. 7 pages of vague postings, no commendations, no disciplinary actions. It was the file of a ghost. But as she scrolled to the bottom, a single, encrypted line made the hairs on her arm stand up. Directive 7, Archival. She had seen top-secret clearance levels her entire career, but she had never seen archival attached to a living candidate. It was a designation that wasn't supposed to exist. On the training grounds, another pair of eyes had found Anya. Cadet Eva Rostova, a quiet but fiercely observant candidate, felt a prickle of unease. It was in the small things. The way Anya's gaze didn't just look, but assessed. She wasn't taking in the sights. She was mapping the environment. Eva had grown up learning that the most dangerous predators were the ones that didn't need to roar. Anya Petrova was silent. Gunnery Sergeant Maddox's brand of instruction was simple. Break them down, then build them back up in his own image. From day one, he made Anya Petrova his personal project. His voice, a rasping bark, singled her out for the smallest perceived infractions. He saw her quiet confidence not as discipline, but as disrespect. He saw her civilian background as a flaw to be brutally excised. The first major test came during the weapons drill. The task, field strip the XR-11 modular carbine, clean it, and reassemble it against the clock. The air in the armory was thick with the smell of gun, oil, and anxiety. Recruits fumbled with pins and springs, their movements clumsy with misplaced urgency. Then it was Anya's turn. She approached the rifle with a feigned hesitation, her hands moving with a deliberate, almost theatrical slowness. She seemed to study each component as if seeing it for the first time. Maddox stood behind her, a smug grin spreading across his face, ready to unleash a torrent of criticism. But Eva Rostova, watching from 2 stations down, saw something else entirely. She saw through the performance. Anya's fingers, while moving slowly, knew exactly where to go. There was no fumbling, no searching. The way she applied pressure to release the bolt carrier group, the effortless twist to unseat the firing pin. It wasn't the work of a novice. It was the muscle memory of someone who could do this in complete darkness, under fire. It was an act of concealment so perfect, it was more terrifying than overt skill. Anya finished with less than a minute to spare, reinforcing Maddox's narrative that she was barely competent. He barked a dismissive comment and moved on, his prejudice confirmed. Eva leaned against her workbench, her heart pounding. That isn't clumsiness, she thought, a cold realization washing over her. That's calibration. She's precisely controlling how bad she appears. The harassment escalated. During forced marches, Maddox would ride her relentlessly, yet her pace never wavered. Eva, a meticulous record keeper, timed her. Mile after mile, day after day, Anya's splits were identical down to the second. It wasn't the pace of a human struggling against fatigue. It was the output of a machine. Her response to Maddox's tirades was always the same, delivered in a flat, emotionless tone that seemed to absorb his anger without a trace. Yes, Gunnery Sergeant. She offered him no anger, no fear, no weakness to exploit. She was a stone wall, and his fury simply broke against her, leaving her unmoved. The shooting range at Fort Drakon was where pretenders were exposed. The wind howled through the canyons, making a mockery of marksmanship. Maddox stationed himself directly behind Anya, his arms crossed, his voice dripping with theatrical sarcasm for the benefit of the other recruits. He was performing, casting himself as the master and her as the fool. The targets were set at standard qualification distances. Around Anya, a symphony of failure unfolded. Missed shots, frustrated curses, the metallic clang of ejected casings hitting the concrete floor. Anya stepped up to the line. Her posture was a textbook illustration of a perfect shooting stance. She raised the XR-11 slowly, as if recalling a distant memory. The desert heat shimmered through her scope, distorting the air. She fired, then again, and again. 5 shots in total, each one spaced with the same deliberate, unhurried rhythm. When the ceasefire was called, Maddox swaggered forward, a demeaning critique already on his lips. But as her target slid back into view, the words died in his throat. The other instructors leaned in, their casual expressions freezing into disbelief. It wasn't 5 holes. It was 1. A single, ragged opening punched directly through the center of the bullseye. 5 shots, 1 point of entry. The range master, a grizzled veteran who had trained Tier 1 operators for 20 years, went pale. He had seen a grouping like that only twice before. Both times, the shooter's name was now a redacted file buried so deep it was a myth. But Maddox, blinded by his ego, saw only what he wanted to see. Lucky break, he grumbled, turning away before anyone could challenge him. The cracks in her facade widened during hand-to-hand combat training. Maddox's style was about brute force and raw dominance. He demonstrated techniques by slamming candidates to the mat, his movements designed to intimidate, not instruct. Anya was paired with a former collegiate wrestler who outweighed her by 70 pounds. The man came at her with a confident smirk. Anya looked hesitant, almost uncertain. She executed the move Maddox had shown, a standard hip throw. The wrestler went down with a heavy thud. But Eva, watching from the edge of the mat, saw the truth. Just before the throw, Anya's weight shifted by a fraction of an inch. Her grip adjusted by millimeters. The leverage she generated was scientifically precise, using the man's own momentum to create a point of structural failure. It was cleaner, faster, and infinitely more efficient than the brutish technique Maddox had taught. When the gunnery sergeant came over to correct her form, telling her to use more force, she just nodded. But her nod didn't say, "I understand." It said, "I've done this with people who actually mattered." The breaking point arrived in week 4, delivered by General Thorne himself. He was a man who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. He gathered the remaining candidates under the harsh glare of floodlights, the cold night air biting at their exposed skin. "Tomorrow, we separate the contenders from the pretenders," Thorne announced, his voice echoing across the parade ground. "We call it the Crucible. It's not a drill. It's a revelation of character." Then his eyes found Anya. "Petrova," he boomed, "your performance has been marginal. You've struggled with basic competencies since day one. We need to see if anything from your civilian life translates to this world." He let the silence hang in the air, a weapon in itself. "You will face 5 of this facility's finest trainers. 1-on-1 is a test. 5-on-1 is a statement. Survive for 30 seconds, and we'll call it pass." A wave of shock rippled through the candidates. This wasn't a test. It was a public execution, sanctioned and staged. It was a message to everyone, conform, or be broken. But then, the unthinkable happened. Anya smiled. It wasn't a smile of defiance or fear. It was a look of quiet, almost serene contentment, as if she were listening to a favorite song only she could hear. Watching from the back row, Eva Rostova felt her blood run cold. Every instinct she had suppressed for weeks erupted into a single, terrifying certainty. They have picked the wrong person. By morning, the news had spread like wildfire. The Crucible wasn't just for the candidates anymore. It was a base-wide event. Off-duty soldiers and field officers lined the perimeter of the vast training pit. Medics stood by with trauma kits. Even Commander Reed was there, her arms folded, her face an unreadable mask. She had spent the night trying to break the encryption on that single line in Anya's file, with no success. The 5 trainers emerged, stretching casually. They were apex predators, handpicked by Maddox, each a master of his craft. They moved with the supreme confidence of men who knew the outcome was already decided. But when Anya Petrova walked out of the equipment bay, the atmosphere shifted. Her gait was different. The feigned uncertainty was gone. Now, every step was centered, precise, and lethally efficient. It wasn't the walk of someone who had been trained. It was the walk of someone who had been conditioned. General Thorne stepped forward. No weapons. No eye gouging. The test ends when you surrender or can no longer stand. Petrova, any last words? Anya turned her head, not to the general, but to Maddox, who stood smirking by the edge of the pit. Her voice, when she spoke, was not loud, but it cut through the silence like glass. "Just one question, Gunnery Sergeant," she said, her tone level and calm. "When this is over, will you finally admit you never knew what you were looking at?" Before he could answer, she rolled up her sleeves. The gesture revealed what her file had hidden. Her forearms were a roadmap of violence. The faint, cross-hatched lines of surgical repairs, the puckered memory of shrapnel, and the pale, smooth trace of a bullet wound. They were the scars of a life lived far beyond any civilian experience. Commander Reed inhaled sharply. She recognized the pattern. Maddox blew the whistle. One sharp blast, and the desert air exploded with motion. The first man, the massive wrestler, charged forward like a bull, intending to end it with a single, crushing tackle. But where he expected a body, he found only empty space. Anya had shifted less than a foot to her left, a subtle, last-second pivot. As he blundered past, her hand shot out and struck the base of his neck with 2 stiffened fingers. It wasn't a punch, it was a neurological switch. His legs buckled, and he collapsed into a heap, his eyes blinking at a sky that no longer made sense. 2 more came at her from the flanks, a coordinated pincer attack. But Anya was gone again. She dropped, and they collided over her, a tangle of limbs and stunned surprise. Before they could recover, she was among them. A palm heel strike to one man's collarbone. A sickening crack echoed through the pit. A precise kick to the other's knee joint, locking it backwards. 2 down. The fourth, a wiry knife-fighting expert, came in low and fast. He lunged for her legs, but she was already rising, an elbow connecting with the base of his skull with surgical precision. He crumpled without a sound. Less than 20 seconds had passed. Only one remained. Novak, the strategist, the last man standing. But he wasn't advancing. He was frozen, his hands twitching, his stance wavering. He was staring not at an opponent, but at an event he couldn't process. She wasn't fighting. She was expressing a language, and that language was violence. From the perimeter, Commander Reed saw it. A tattoo, previously hidden by Anya's sleeve, was now visible on her inner wrist. 6 thin, parallel lines with the top one crossed out. Reed's blood ran cold. She whispered the name to herself, a name that only existed in ghost stories and redacted reports. Project Chimera, the Phantom Unit, operatives whose files were erased, whose actions were never recorded, and whose survival meant they were officially dead. The crossed out line meant she was the sole survivor of her unit. Novak took a shaky step back. "I yield." He breathed, the words barely audible. The entire confrontation had lasted 83 seconds. A profound, stunned silence descended upon the cauldron. It was the sound of an entire institution's worldview being shattered. Anya didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply moved to each of the downed men, her touch now clinical and gentle, checking their pulses and ensuring no permanent damage had been done. Only their pride had been irrevocably broken. The silence was finally fractured by a single sound, clapping. It was Eva Rostova. She was on her feet, her hands coming together, not in celebration, but in awe. Another soldier joined her, then another, until the entire gallery was standing, their applause echoing off the canyon walls. They weren't cheering a victory. They were acknowledging a truth they had been too blind and too arrogant to see. Anya picked up a towel, wiped the dust from her face, and walked away with the same unhurried grace she'd had on the day she arrived. Within hours, she was gone. Her transfer papers were signed, her file sealed under a clearance level so high it was practically invisible. Her new, official title was Advanced Combat Instructor, but at Fort Drakon, her name was never spoken aloud again. She became a legend, a ghost story whispered among recruits, a reminder that the most dangerous weapon is the one you underestimate. The story of those 83 seconds became a permanent part of the base's DNA, a redefinition of what deadly truly looked like. True strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it observes, it calculates, and it waits for the perfect moment to reveal itself. What do you think drives someone like Anya to hide their true power? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Please, comment with respect for everyone's opinion. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories that challenge our perceptions.